First up is tell you a little story. So when I kick off my project meetings or workshops, or when I'm speaking at conference in particular, I always like to ask the audience one question. And it's a fairly simple and seems very innocuous question, and that is, show me your hand, who's had a successful project lately? Pretty loaded question, and there's always a few smiles in the audience. Often I get, a handful of people putting their hand up with a big proud look on their face, which is fantastic. And then I say, okay, keep your hand up if you can tell me why. Tell me how you know that your project was successful. And there's often some quizzical looks. Is this woman crazy? What does she mean? Well, it's successful because it was successful. But what I'm actually looking for there is a little bit of proof on how we know we were successful. More often than not, the reasoning that I get from those people who still have their hand up is, well, the technology was implemented and it worked. Always a good combination. It was implemented on time and hopefully on budget. Also, equally good combinations. And this is definitely a step in the right direction for project success. However, it's not project success. What these people are pointing out is project management success, which is definitely a key to success. However, it's not the be-all and end-all. So if technology implemented on time, on budget, isn't success, then what is success, and how do we know we've reached it? That's the big question. So our webinar today is about how to avoid an epic fail, but in part doing that we need to actually realize what success is and how we reach it and how we know we've reached it. So what is success? Well, it's not all rainbows and unicorns. Success needs to be unambiguous. We need to know that we've actually achieved it. And because of that, it needs to be measurable. We need some kind of a benchmark, some kind of a clue to say, okay, we didn't have this before and now we do. We're there. It also needs to be tied to the bottom line. And there's often a disconnect when we get to the point of implementation in a project between the bottom line, things being measurable outside of implemented on time and on budget, and also the ability to make our success goal orientated, so align it with the business goals, align it with the goals of the people within the business or the actual goals of the organization as a whole. So let's talk a little bit about that. So are we there yet? How do we know we've actually reached success? Well, we need to have those clear success markers, clear goals and objectives that this project is trying to achieve. Now, more often than not, these were actually cited to some degree, often at a high level, but cited at some degree in the PID, in the project initiation document, way back when somebody with a bright spark and a great idea decided, hey, we should do this project because the organization will benefit from it. And they put together their project initiation document and they got a budget. And everybody had a little party and went, yay, let's now find a team to do our project. And the moment that that team forms, it's like all of those measurable things, the reason why we're doing the project, almost go out the window. They rarely come back up again. They rarely get spoken about in project meetings because everything's about the now. It's about the doing rather than about the success factor. So let's have a quick look at what we actually need to do to bring those project goals and objectives back into play. So before we start the project, before we start the implementation, before we start all the meaty goodness of getting the tech team together and figuring out what the solution's going to look like, going out and talking to the business and getting their user requirements and solving problems, we need to know what are we trying to actually do from a business perspective that is tied to the bottom line. So with great clarity, we need to know what success looks like. This seems like such a redundant thing to say, And I'm hoping that there's a whole bunch of people out there nodding their heads going, yes, that's right, I've worked on projects like that. If we don't know what success looks like, how do we know we got there? How do we know our project was a success beyond the project management success that we've already spoken about? Let's have a look at some examples of what some of these goals or project objectives could look like. Establish a SharePoint platform. Well, that's pretty unambiguous. It's certainly measurable. It wasn't there yesterday, but it's there today. Fairly easily measurable. The ability to classify information to improve discoverability. This is a common objective for a lot of our clients, and an admirable one as well. If we couldn't classify information previously, if it was sitting in a file share on somebody's C drive or D drive or whatever drive it was, and it was just sitting inside a folder that was nested inside 4 other folders that were nested inside the November 2014 folder, then we can't classify that information, and we certainly can't discover it, which is the next objective, the ability to discover and find information. So often, unless we know that something exists and we know exactly where it is and we have access to it, that's the only time we can discover information. So that one, again, quite measurable. We know when we've gotten there. The ability to deliver immediate efficiencies through process automation.
Muted.
So,
Unmuted.
Immediate efficiencies means that the moment that we put this solution in place, the moment that we roll out to the business, the way in which they do whatever that business automation was has been streamlined to the point where you're getting immediate efficiencies. No longer are there 4 or 5 people doing X, Y, and Z in a row. It's now automated, and the approval process is seamless and goes via email, and it's a click of a button, etc., and it's secure and runs down a whole lot of fuzzy logic. So you'll see with these objectives that they are quite clear and they're quite measurable, and we can clearly understand when we have or have not achieved them. Hopefully that makes sense. So now, how many of you have worked on that project? How many of you have actually worked on projects that don't have defined success criteria? I know that this is certainly not an uncommon thing. I work with many, many clients where we come in and they say, we've got a problem to solve. This is our problem and we want to solve it, and our solution is to put SharePoint in or to implement a fantastic CRM system. And don't get me wrong, we want to do those things for you. We want to actually give you the technology and help you embrace it to fix some of these issues. However, let's go back and look at what the real problems are in a little more detail and actually clarify some success criteria as well. A good consultant will always question you on this. This is not somebody being difficult. This is, let's make sure that we can do the best we can to set your company up for the best possible success. All OBS consultants will question and make sure that there is defined success criteria in place. And if there's not, we can help you do that. We can help you make those things happen. Alrighty, so now we know what success kind of looks like, or what we need to be able to know whether we've achieved success. Let's have a look at a little bit of benchmarking. So I'm going to bring in some statistics, so the number crunchers out there, you'll love this bit. The ProSci 2014 Best Practices in Projects report. This came out at the beginning of this year and it was produced at the end of last year. This is the 9th report coming out of ProSci. It's a very meaty report. It's definitely well known and well cited within across a lot of different industries. So over 2,000 participants across 821 countries, multiple countries there, and the participants had to be within a project role within the last 12 months. So that could be change managers, project managers, they could have been a sponsor, they could have been a stakeholder. They could have been anybody within that project in the last 12 months. And the projects ranged from less than 100K all the way through to, multi-million-dollar projects. So there's a really lovely wide sweep there. Now this is where it starts to get interesting. So the greatest contributors to success And what's interesting for me, and I'm a little bit of a nerd about these sorts of things, I actually really enjoy looking at these statistics. When you compare them across multiple years, seeing what changes and what doesn't change, very, very little actually changes in that top 10. Very little. Every now and then, 2 and 3 will swap. But basically, it kind of stays fairly static, which is sad. So the greatest contributor to success is active and visible executive sponsorship. And we say this to clients, and we often get a lot of nodding heads. Yes, 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 we've got an executive sponsor. Well, hang on a second. Let's take a step back. We didn't say we needed an executive sponsor. We need active and visible executive sponsorship. That means somebody who is actively going to propel the project, actively going to push it forward, to let the people within the organization know, hey, this is a priority. I know you've got a lot of things on your plate right now, but this is actually a priority, so I'd love it if you could make time for some of these workshops. I believe in this solution. Whatever it is that these guys have to stand on the hill and sing about, that's active and visible executive sponsorship, leading from the top. Number 2 is frequent and open communication. That's a bit of a no-brainer. Number 3, structured change management approach. Didn't necessarily expect to see that there unless you're in the change management field, I guess. Number 4, a dedicated resource for the change management. We're going to explore that one a little bit later. Number 5, employee participation. Again, this seems like a no-brainer, but so often the participation of the staff, of the employees, is quite minimal. We simply lump our projects onto them. And any communication is simply saying, hey, it's coming. Not, hey, this is what it is and this is why it's coming. And this is why it's so important that we do it, because if we don't, this is what might happen. Not full, well-rounded communication. Simply, hey, we're coming. Be prepared, whatever that means. So employee participation is about empowering the people who are going to be using our solution to actually be part of the making of that solution, bringing them in early to figure out what that solution is going to look like, finding those subject matter experts within the organization. Often people call them champions. Get them in early. Get their buy-in. Ask them what they think they need. It doesn't have to be a technical question. People don't need to understand the technical specs of whatever the solution is going to look like in the end. They know what their problems are. They know what their pain points are. And most people have no problem articulating what they are. Bring them in and let them use you as their agony aunt for half an hour and paint what their pain problems are. Engagement with the support of the middle management. Again, we're going to come up and have another more in-depth look at this one a little bit later, but don't ever underestimate the importance of that line of middle management. Whatever that represents in your organization, they will have the power to either make your project a success or stop it in its tracks. So, transversely, let's look at some of the biggest obstacles. So what's stopping us? Number 1, ineffective sponsorship from senior leaders. The antithesis of what was a good success marker is also the number 1 obstacle for our project. Ineffective sponsorship. This is where we get the tick and flick. This is where an executive sponsor may pop their head in the room and go, yay guys, well done, at the beginning of the project, and we never see them again. It could be an inability to escalate situations that need a decision to be made timely so that our project doesn't lose momentum. Okay, so ineffective sponsorship represents a lot of different things. Insufficient change management, resourcing and funding. Again, it's pretty much transversely what was said in the success markers. So often when people are citing that there was inefficient change management, they don't necessarily, and I'm certainly not meaning to insult anyone, they don't necessarily know what the field of change management is all about, but they know that you didn't transition me particularly well from the old to the new. I know that for a fact. I don't know what a change manager does, but I know that this was not a good scenario. It didn't feel good for me. I didn't feel empowered. I didn't feel like I got all the training I needed or all of the information that I needed to feel comfortable with XYZ. Resistance to change from employees, well, this one's always going to be a given. Okay, so resistance to change, we all resist change. This is not just in our work life, this is everywhere. You know, we've all heard it, change is bad. It's not necessarily, but some of us do it a little better than others. Middle management resistance, again, there it comes again, and ineffective communications. So often our ineffective communications are those ones where it's, you know, we're coming, not why and how and what does it look like and how does this impact me and what do you require of me, all of those sorts of things that actually mean good, meaty, full stories about our communications. So a little bit of info on resistance. I find this one quite interesting. I hope you do too. So some of the common reasons why employees resist. So this was the top 5. Lack of awareness. What I want you to do when you look at these top 5 is how do we mitigate that? That's the mindset that I want you to be in when you look at this list. How can we mitigate some of these areas of resistance? Because most of them are actually quite easy to mitigate. Lack of awareness? Well, let's do a big awareness session. And I remember, awareness is not just I'm aware that the project is coming. I'm aware why the project is coming. I'm aware of what's in it for me, what's going to change for me, all of those things, because as human beings, we're quite myopic. We sit with our blinkers on and we haven't changed that much from when we were 3 and the world revolved around us. When we think about something affecting us or a new project or a new position or there's a new boss or my company's been purchased by another company, you know, whatever the scenario is, we often think our first thought is, oh wow, how's this going to affect me? And that's just human nature. So we need to answer those questions for the people that we're going to be impacting whenever we do a project. The impact on the person's current job role, again, we can fix this with some great comms. It's important to note that no jobs will change with this current project. It's important to note that no job losses will come from this project. That's number 5. Okay, so good comms will actually mitigate 1, 2, and 5. Organisations' poor past performance with change. Enter the baggage. We've all got baggage. We've all got war stories about really gnarly, awful projects that just went south. And we can probably all sit down with a cold one and talk about how bad those projects were. What we want to do, however, is to have as many successful projects as we can under our belt. And then the more we do that, each time we engage with the business on a new project, they think about the last project that was actually really good. Again, with this questioning, I often sit down and talk to people in a workshop forum and say, so who's worked on a good project before? And instantly people's faces light up and you'll get a hand shooting up in the air and they'll say whatever the project was, and then a bunch of people around the table will nod and go, yeah, that was pretty good, wasn't it? And then when I actually talk to them about, well, what was it that made it good? You know, they start citing things like, well, we went through these really cool training sessions and then we did this and there was a drop-in center so we could come in and try and figure out how to migrate our XYZs from one place to the other. And, they talked about how they were engaged, how they were being helped across the line, how they were being enabled to go from current state to future state. It's not anything different to that. It's always the same. Maybe a different way of doing it, maybe a different team that did it, but it's always the same thing. They helped me get from A to B, rather than just expecting me to go there. Number 4, lack of visible support and commitment from managers. Again, active and visible. You can't be a tick and flick. You can't be just a name on a piece of paper. And if that's all you can give to the project, that's fine, but let's mitigate number 4 by bringing in a coalition of support, a coalition of sponsors, so that we have sponsors right across the organisation to actually help us from below, from the top, from the middle, to push out any resistors and to make sure that we can continuously move forward with any of our activities. Don't put all of our eggs into one basket and rely on one person who is often quite high level and quite time poor to start with. And interestingly enough, often has a future state of looking at the organisation rather than a current state. Which is right, it's exactly right. They should be thinking strategically for the organisation if they're at that high level. However, that's not helpful if we're trying to get our employees from point A to point B. We need to actually know what that current state looks like rather than just focusing on the future state. Resistance from managers. This is an interesting one. So remember, our middle managers are going to be some of our greatest assets. They can also be our biggest detractors if we don't furnish them with what they need to also succeed in this project. So here's some of the things that they're going to need. The number one cited reason for resistance within middle management was a lack of awareness about the involvement in the project. Oh God, I didn't even know that we were actually participating in this. We're doing the XYZ project at the moment. My people are completely snowed under with work for the next 3 weeks. Good luck getting us on your radar. You know, we don't want to blindside people. We want to make sure that our communications are appropriate and sent out in a timely fashion, and also sent out from the appropriate person. Let's make sure that our executive sponsor sends out some information to our middle managers that actually outlines the priority of the project. Because if we've got 3 things that we need to do and we've only got time to do 2, who do we look to find out what the priority is? Our immediate manager. So again, it makes sense within our communications to make sure that all of the management levels that we're going to be dealing with or interacting with within our project have that information as early on as possible and know exactly what it actually looks like. What does that mean for me and my team? What are we going to need to do?
May I ask a question?
Absolutely, Garrett. Go for it.
Just in terms of both the executive sponsorship and the factors that drive the underlying support framework for the project, how important in the context of these items is a sense of ownership for the people involved, or an understanding of the bigger picture drivers and reasoning for the project? Is it important for them to belong to that vision and to understand why the organization is undertaking it, or do they care more about just what's right in front of their face?
A little bit of this column, a little bit of that column. So until you gave me the very last part of that question, I was going to say, yeah, for sure they do need to know, and it is important to them to understand. Rather than 80-20, I'd probably go 90-10, and the 10% are people that just, you know what, they go to work, they do what they need to do, whatever my manager tells me, so long as it's within reason, that's what I do, and I'm not going to resist, and I just go with the flow. There's that 10%. And I know there's a lot of people out there thinking, God, you've got 10% whole of that? But yes, there's a bunch of people who just do what they do. Then you've got the other 90 that actually do want to understand, why am I doing this? You know, this is human nature. It goes right back to when we were children. We did what our parents told us to do, or what the adult told us to do, because that's what we were told. And then at a certain point we cross over and start questioning why. And then the whole way through our schooling and our university years and hopefully work, we're also encouraged to question, well, why do I do this? Well, the why is because we're trying to achieve X, Y, Z. This is the part you take in achieving X, Y, Z, and this is what you can get out of it. So this is why our comms need to be quite well-rounded and very, very specific to the audience that we're talking to make sure that we're answering those questions. We need to make it worth their while. We need to make it understandable and logical as to why we're doing this. Nobody likes change for the sake of change. So even if this change is, you know, for some pretty flimsy reasons, we still need to actually say exactly why we're doing it and why we need them to do it. Also highlighting what's going to happen if they don't. And that's not necessarily punitive measures, but if we don't change as an organization, we won't reach XYZ company goals. So it's about slowly shifting culture as well as the changes within the immediate project.
And culture is actually the word that's driving my question there.
Right.
Many of us would say that we're driven by that. We're driven best to our best performance by that which we can be passionate about. And we work and live in cultures that ask us to be passionate about our organization and to be loyal to our organization. And those things go hand in hand with being involved or let in on the reasons why, to my mind. And so to me, that's a perfect fit. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. But yeah, you hit the nail on the head, to be involved with. So this is why it's so important to get those champions, those subject matter experts in as early as possible, even in the initiation stage, to say, hey, you guys, we've chosen you because you're the go-to person in your area. You're the person people turn to when they need to know something. We want to tap into some of your knowledge. The amount of tacit knowledge that sits within the people that we work with is mind-boggling. Why we would ever ignore that and not tap into that wealth is beyond me. Okay, number 4. We missed number 3. Increased workload and lack of time. Again, this may simply be a perception. It may be a perception that their involvement in this project is going to increase their workload and they don't have enough time. It may be a perception that the priority of this project is not as high as some other things that they're working on. Again, communications can actually outline priorities and can also say, you know what, we understand that you're really under the pump right now. We are going to impact your business as usual as least as possible. Please understand that that's the position that we're coming from. So when we ask for half an hour of your time, that's all we need. We are going to start the meeting on time, finish the meeting on time, and not ask for more than what we originally asked for. And that's really important in getting trust from the people within the business. Now the 4th one, culture of change resistance and past failures. Again, this is where the more often we have those successful projects, those projects that made people feel good about working on them, the more often they're going to be positive about starting the next project, because there's a good chance that it's going to be like the last one, and we really liked that. I felt good about that. As Garrett said, I was engaged about that and I felt passionate about my job again for the first time in ages. So we have an opportunity to actually really get people to stand up and participate. So now we know what success looks like and how we might mitigate some of the risks that are involved in achieving it. We need to know how to mitigate some of the risks that are involved in achieving it. How do we do that? It's all good and well to know what the risks are, but how do we actually mitigate it? OBS has a bunch of diagnostic tools that we use within our projects. Some we would probably classify as project management tools, some are change management tools. We don't really classify them a great deal. We know that they're all needed for success. So I'm going to go through 2 in particular today. The first of which is the project change triangle. This is a really, really simple diagnostic that we can run with the project team or simply a couple of representatives from either the project or the business. It's no longer than half an hour. I've certainly done it in 15 minutes and it creates a great deal of value. What it does is give us a current state, a really good picture of what the current state is. There's no right, there's no wrong, it simply is. And remember, way back at the beginning of this presentation, we said we need to know where we're coming from and where we're going and what the success criteria is on getting there so that we can measure whether we've succeeded in our project. This is part of actually giving us that benchmark. This is part of giving us that bottom line. This is where we are right now. So it's 3 sets of 10 questions. The questions only have 3 possible answers, 1, 2, or 3, so it's really, really easy to do. The questions are specifically targeted at 3 main areas. So these are the 3 essential areas for a successful project. Leadership and sponsorship, we've spoken a bit about that already. Project management. We've assumed that our project management is top-notch. Perhaps it needs looking at. We're going to have a look at that. And then the other one is change management. So we're going to lead this project with a vision. We're going to manage the project with some tools to keep it on time and on budget and make sure that our scope doesn't slip and that we've got all the resources we need. And then we're going to take the people with us, because no matter how beautiful our technology looks, if nobody's using it, it's just an expensive paperweight. Okay, so the three essentials: leadership and sponsorship, project management, and change management. So we asked 10 questions about these three areas, and it spits out a score. And you can see there on the screen with the assessment results. The green says this is a strength area. The orange or amber says, okay, possible risk here. And then the red is high risk and jeopardy. This has the potential to derail your entire project. What this diagnostic does is spit out a really simple little triangle like you see up the top there. And I like to equate this to a milking stool. You know, the old milking stools, little round stool, 3 legs. Imagine if one of those legs was a bit shorter than the others, or if all 3 were at different lengths. Not exactly a smooth ride, you know, not the best scenario. That's what this project change triangle looks like. It gives us 3 different legs, and we're hoping that those legs are as long as they can possibly be and as even as they can possibly be. So when we get the result, so let's look at the result that's actually on the slide now. And you can see that, if I can get my pointer to work, there we go. You can see that there are 3 levels there. Project management on this particular scale, diagnostic is pretty strong, and this is not uncommon. Project management in organizations is usually pretty mature by now, which is fantastic. That's great. So when we answered our project management questions, we got a pretty good score. However, you can see here there's definitely room for improvement on our leadership and sponsorship. That's not to say that we don't have good leaders. That simply means that the person that's been assigned executive sponsorship of this particular project, after questioning from the diagnostic, we've discovered, you know what, they're so time poor, they're probably not going to be able to give us that active and participative feel that we need for our project. So we need to just mitigate this with a bunch of other sponsors as well that are going to be there to bolster up the priority and need for the project. And then, of course, the other part of the triangle is change management, is taking the people on this journey, because there's no use in going on the journey unless all of your staff want to go with you there. You're changing either the culture or the way that people are doing things. So often this is an area of much less maturity within organizations. The other thing is, if you already have a change manager in your organization, and we definitely work with a lot of organizations that have change managers already, more often than not, that change manager is an organizational change manager. So I'm going to highlight a little bit of a difference, and it seems a little like semantics, but there's a big difference. Organizational change management talks about great programs of work, about shifting culture, about doing things that take a long time, okay, and they take multiple projects to get across the line. What we're talking about here is the change management, or the management of change, that comes out of this particular project. It's often far too granular for those organizational change managers to have enough bandwidth to be able to actually manage. So we can come in and offer a bunch of tools, or, you know, just do the heavy lifting that's involved in creating plans and strategies and so on, and then have somebody in-house go and implement those plans. Everything that we talk about with regards to change management, particularly at OBS, is very, very scalable, and we can work with whatever your in-house proficiency is, and I'm going to explore that a little bit more later. So pretty simple diagnostic, takes 15 to 30 minutes, you don't need the entire organization, and spits out a pretty good indicator of where we're sitting. And you know what, when we look at the results of this, particularly with the executive sponsor in the room, this usually isn't great news, but it's quite telling at the same time. There's often, you know, a person sitting back in their chair going, yeah, it's been like that for a little while now, but you've really highlighted where we actually need to strengthen the way that we're going to come at this project. So 10 questions for each of those areas. answers from 1 being the lowest, 3 to the highest. We pull out all the questions that were answered with a 1. This is what we need to mitigate first off the line. It gives us a really great way of knowing exactly where to direct our efforts. Okay. Next.
I do have an
you've got a question? Yeah, sure.
A listener has asked, is this tool useful as a check-in at various stages of the project to see how it is tracking as it goes along? Yeah,
for sure. Did you pay that guy? That's a great question. So when we actually use this diagnostic within a project, I would often, depending on the duration of the project, I would often do this diagnostic up to 4 times throughout the project, because it's such a quick and simple and you know, it's non-taxing to actually run the diagnostic. We can do it on multiple times and actually look and see that triangle growing out and getting stronger. It's brilliant that way. It's also, if you are a project manager and you're doing a project with OBS, we can feed you so much information that you can then actually report up to your steering committee or, you know, to the senior people within your organization or in the business. So these diagnostics actually spit out some really great things that we can put into our PowerPoint presentations and so on that actually show the progress of our projects. Hope that answered that one. Okay.
Excellent.
Okay, the second of our diagnostics that we most commonly use, and it's got a bit of a mouthful of a name, it's the Change Management ROI Calculator. Now, when we talk about change management, if we go in, sorry, I'll rephrase that. If we go in and speak to an organization about running a project with them, project management is a no-brainer. Absolutely, of course we need that. Why wouldn't we do that? We couldn't have project success if we didn't have project management. But then we talk about change management and it's like, whoa, hang on, put the brakes on. Not sure that we really need that. We do some pretty terrific training here. Training's not change management. Training is most definitely part of change management, but it's not the be-all and end-all. So let's flip that conversation a bit, okay? So if you're the project manager, but you're not necessarily the person that's signing the check, that's creating the budgets to be able to scope in a whole bunch of change management activities, this is how you can then sell it back to your business, okay? What we need to do first is let's get a list of, you know, say the top 5 goals and objectives that the project wants to achieve. Remember back to the success factors? We're now going to use them again. Okay, so perhaps go and dig out that PID, that project initiation document. Find out what the project's actually trying to solve rather than simply technology. List them down. And then in a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the least contribution, 10 being the greatest contribution, actually order them, because sometimes those goals aren't all equal in their importance. And in fact, most times they're not. Some of them are just value adds. Some of them would be, hey, it would be lovely if we could do this too, but the most important thing we need here is the ability to surface this information across multiple teams, whatever the objective is. So we list out our objectives and then we order them from least to greatest contribution. And then we look at those objectives and we figure out how much of that objective is actually dependent on people changing what they do now to achieve. If you're giving them a new IT system to do XYZ, that's changing what they do now. If you're asking them to collaborate in an open fashion, to share information, to classify information so that we can better manage our knowledge, so that we can better manage our information, we can better record manage, document manage, whatever it is that we're trying to achieve. If we're asking people to do something different to what they're doing now, then we actually have objectives that are tied up in taking our people on a journey. Okay? So what this ROI calculator does is it actually calculates what objectives are based on adoption and usage. So we pop in a whole bunch of analytics in there that say, okay, and it spits out a couple of different graphs. This is just the one that I've popped in here, but I think there's up to about 8 different scenarios that we can actually pull out. But basically what it says to us, if adoption and usage is absolutely zero, then 17% of your project benefits, so this was based on the objectives that you can see just down here in the lower part of the screen. So in this particular case, 17% of your project benefits is going to be realized in this $500,000 project if we don't mitigate any kind of change management.
What we're really getting to here is the realization of business value.
Yeah,
isn't it?
It certainly is. So when we look at this ROI calculator, there's a whole bunch of metrics that are in there. It's too much for me to go through today, but what we can do is, is pop in some numbers and say, okay, so what if we did have that 10% of people in our organization that just does it? They just get in and do it. They don't complain. They just get in and do it. Well, no problem. We can spit out what that graph looks like too. So we get a sliding scale. So again, this is a great tool for you to be able to demonstrate just how much of the project benefits are dependent on employee adoption and usage, and what we can do to mitigate against not attaining those. Because remember, not attaining those equals project fail. Okay, not project management fail, but project fail. Somewhere along the line, there's a person that has this in their KPIs. More often than not, thankfully, we now are actually engaging with that person from the business. In the days of old, we would most commonly, as consultants, be consulting with the IT team rather than the business because there's technology involved. A successful project will actually bring in people from both of those teams because they are equally important to the success of the project. And somewhere, somebody in the business, and this is this has been an interesting one, certainly for both Garrett and I, more often than not now, somebody within the IT team also has adoption and usage as part of their KPIs. This is fabulous. Organizations in this economic time are realizing we need to make people accountable for the projects that they're running to make sure that we actually attain our return on investment. And what does that look like? And how do we get there?
I was going to second that. The years that I spent as a systemic project manager, I would echo that there has been a growing maturity and a change to how that is addressed within the organization. And it has evolved from simple on-time, on-budget perspectives to being able to tangibly measure the business benefit during and following a project on an ongoing basis. It's refreshing to me to see a framework here where we actually have metrics that can be demonstrated, that can be tracked. Because sometimes those benefits can be a bit intangible and hard to get your head around.
Absolutely. And if we hark back to our rainbows and unicorns slide where I said that everything needs to be tied to the bottom line. And this, I think, is where sometimes some of the people in change management do themselves a little bit of a disservice, is by not tying it back to that bottom line. I often get told by even my colleagues, oh, you do the touchy-feely side. Well, it's not just the touchy-feely side. Yeah, I do that. I actually think about people's feelings. I get all of that. But I also have to make sure that it makes business sense. It's tied to a metric, a dollar figure, the bottom line. We're actually realizing our benefits.
This is completely consistent with many of the project management methodologies that exist as well. A core tenet for Prince 2 project management is the continuous maintenance of business justification, whether that includes people's feelings or not.
Well, I put it to you, Garrett, that if taking people on that journey is what's going to actually let you attain those business results, then we need to look at both. Okay, so project risk mitigation. Change management can do so much in this area. It can reduce the risk and it can increase the potential for the actual project success, and it can also bolster project management success. And that's, that's a two-way street. So getting people on board and not resisting continuously means that we don't lose our momentum. We don't lose our flow. We can continue with our progressive rollout, with our phased approach, with whatever it is that we're actually doing, and still get great results. So I hear you say, but we do change management. We got some fantastic end user training. Well, I applaud you for doing that, because some organizations don't even do that. There's an assumption that because I think it's easy enough to use, we don't even need to do training. They'll get it. They'll figure it out. They have to. Training does not equate to change management. This is a really, really important one. Communications does not equate to change management. They are both essential keys. They're essential ingredients, but they don't create the entire pie. Okay, so we definitely need comms. We definitely need training. But the one thing that comms and training don't address, Garrett, you want to give it a guess?
People's feelings?
Well, yes, yeah, people's feelings. So it doesn't make me want to do something. It doesn't make me want to do it.
Yes.
It doesn't address desire in the person to actually want to do this.
And it doesn't overcome fear.
No, not at all. Well, sometimes communications can overcome some fear, can make me understand that, okay, the things that I thought were going to happen aren't necessarily going to happen, because I've been told that and I've been explained that, you know, this is how it's really going to happen. So sometimes we can overcome some fear, but it doesn't make me want to grab it and run. It doesn't make me want to be an early adopter. You know, it doesn't ring my bell. None of those things are going to do that. Okay, so that's where some of the other change management tools that we use, which I'm not going to labour today, things like the ADCAR methodology, where we actually address an individual person's desire to do something. Okay, so there is a little more science behind it than simply, you know, putting out a really fantastic email sent by the appropriate person. But do we need to hire a professional to do these things? Can't we do it in-house? Can't you just tell me what it is I need to do? In short, unless you have an in-house resource to do change, the answer is yes, you do need to hire a professional. But the other side of that is it doesn't have to be really, really painful. It doesn't have to be really, really expensive. Remember, everything that we've spoken about here from a change management perspective is completely scalable. Okay, we don't have to throw the whole kit and caboodle and go out and meet every single individual of your 3,500 employee organization and make sure they're feeling okay and give them a little rub on the back. We don't need to do all of those things. Dependent on what we're actually implementing, to whom, across what time frame, and how many locations, etc., what all those variables are, we can scale a change management solution to fit that and to fit a budget. And remember, any kind of change, or any kind of change management, I should say, is better than none at all.
Is there a residual benefit from the objectivity of having a third party come in to play that role?
Say that again, sorry.
Is there a residual benefit or additional benefit because of the objectivity of having someone outside your organization play this role?
Oh yeah, absolutely. You know, often we don't see what's right in front of our faces, and that's no slight on any individual. We're exactly the same, you and I, Garrett. When we look at something so long, we tend to not necessarily see everything that's there, or we look at it through, you know, through filtered eyes. Having an individual come in and assess an organization with complete unbiased view definitely, you know, has its advantages. Let's flip to the next slide and let's talk about some of the things that we can do to actually tailor what that solution looks like. So this talks to that exact question, Garrett. So depending on what you are capable of doing in your organization, what expertise or what bandwidth or what resources you have at your disposal, we can do some and you can do the other. And by doing that, and that's definitely my preferred way of doing things, change management is always far more successful when, you know, when driven by the people within the organization rather than just a third party. When you do those things, you're constantly increasing the IP about what change management is and what we need in our next project, and hey, why is that group over there resisting and everybody else is, you know, is towing the row? Let's go and find out what their problem is. And I've got some tools in my kit bag to be able to do that. So depending on what you actually have in-house, we can potentially do the change management strategy or the change management plan, and then you can take those and run. You can implement those plans as part of your project team. Or, you know, we can come in one day a week and be the sounding board and the support mechanism for your change management activities. There's lots and lots of different ways in which we could actually fit the solution for an individual. So, I know that we're nearing the end of our time. I have a challenge. I'm throwing a challenge out to everybody who's online today. If you are interested in having either of those two diagnostics run, I would happily go out, or have you come in, either way, and run those diagnostics for you. Okay, so anytime for the next business week, if you want to contact me, details are on the screen, or contact Garrett or anybody else who is you know, already a representative of OBS that you have in your organisation there, and you want either of those diagnostics run for a particular project, I would happily do that free of charge. How's that? My set of steak knives for the day.
There we go.
Yeah, so that's me rabbiting on for my 60 minutes. If there's any questions, Garrett, that's...
So we have one additional that's just come through. Does OBS use these methods themselves with in-house projects?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, we're doing that right now. We're doing that right now. So we have a large project that's potentially restructuring the way that our practices work, and we are managing that change using the same diagnostics and the same methodology in-house. We drink our own champagne.
And I guess I'll add an additional question in terms of how, I mean, these are services that can be consumed more or less in isolation, but better yet, we're baking these into the particular approaches and methodologies that we use for individual client projects. Can you talk a little bit about when, where, and how we attempt to bake some of these activities and benchmarks in?
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually a really good question. The difference between getting, and this kind of sounds a little bit salesy, but it's certainly not meant to be that way, the difference between getting a third-party vendor to come in and do nothing but change management for you, as opposed to having that expertise as part of your project team, the difference is that we can wear multiple hats. So the change management consultants that work in OBS are also your BAs, your technical devs, your project leads. They're people that already wear other hats as well. So we're constantly consuming information and sharing information together. There's no third party, there's no Chinese whispers, that we're all there experiencing the same thing. We'll have a requirements gathering workshop that will happen as part of the BA activities. Prior to that workshop happening, we would have run an awareness session. So we would have come out and tapped the middle managers on the shoulder and had a quick session with them saying, hey guys, this is what it is, this is what's coming, this is what we need from you and what you're going to get from us. Our next steps are, we're going to come and knock on your door and grab some people from the business and actually try and figure out what the requirements are. Have a little think about what your pain points are. Have a little think about how you do things already and bring that to the table. Then the moment that the BA gets into the room and actually starts doing their requirement session, everybody in there doesn't need to be ramped up on the project. They already know. They're comfortable. They had fitted into, you know, their busy week to be able to do that. You'll also have a change person that's sitting there actually listening to that information that's coming out of those sessions that perhaps has a different filter, you know, to some of the others.
So if I am a business manager, middle manager, if I am a project manager, if I'm a project representative from an IT or non-IT perspective, and I like the sound of what we've heard today, but I feel that I'm going to have some barrier resistance selling it as a concept or as a set of principles that we should adopt within my organization to anyone above me. What are the best ways that I can begin to broach that and begin to introduce these concepts?
I think the diagnostic, the ROI diagnostic is probably one of the best ways to do that. The information that actually comes out of that, that's distilled from that diagnostic, will point straight away to the bottom line. So our managers are wanting to know all about what's going to affect the value of the project, whether that be, you know, a project management scenario that's going to, you know, to push out timeframes, that's going to make things more expensive, or whether it's the fact that people just won't adopt it, that's going to make it expensive too. So that ROI calculator diagnostic the way that we actually present that information, that can go directly to, to your superiors, to your executive management, and it highlights the fact that there's a whole lot of value tied up in getting your people to do something differently. And more often than not, unless you're in the army or you're in primary school, just telling them to do so isn't enough.
I think that's a good point to finalize on. We're at the 2-minute mark. Unless there are any additional questions to come through the questions pane, I would like to take this opportunity to thank everyone for their attention this morning. We appreciate everybody's time for. We hope that this dialogue has been of particular value to you. As Jody indicated, there are any number of channels, including direct through Jody, that you can go to learn more about OBS Project Change Management and the other services that we offer. And as always, if there are any questions or additional assistance that you might require, please don't hesitate to reach out. The webinar itself will be packed up as a presentation and video file, audio file, available through our website, and I believe we operate a YouTube channel as well, so keep your eyes peeled for that. And stay tuned for more from OBS. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us today.